Hello, true duelists. YGO Strats here, sitting next to a big old box of blue stripe. That's the Konami certified blue stripe. We got a few tins in there. We'll see what happens. There might be a video, or maybe I'll film it and I'll review the footage and be like, oh, that's shit. And then not put it up for anyone, and then just have like my 9th unboxing video sitting in my archive that I'll never post. We'll find out. But before that happens, we're gonna get through a you could play, because it's not you should. I'm not of the mental state to recommend anyone to play this deck in any real capacity, because if you have any sense for the game, you will quickly find out that this is not a deck you should be playing. But if you've got a more lax locals, I don't know, maybe you'll enjoy it. And if you couldn't tell from the thumbnails, it's the Snecks. I did a brief video about them a few weeks ago, or maybe a few months ago. Time is the enemy, I don't pay attention to it. And in that video, I kind of discussed how underwhelming they are, because that's pretty much the state of decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's either really good and fun or just horribly, horribly, horribly underwhelming. That's why we play the game. So, I got my purple sleeves, I got my trading cards in front of me. There's a bunch in this one. It's not like Fire Kings where I could just shotgun 7 cards and call it a video. So let's not waste any more time. I'm gonna start with Zoha and Flogos. And you can tell I play the deck because I had to read it. Now, each of these primarily serve one role, and that is a body on the field, or more accurately, a means to get other cards into your graveyard. Technically, they each have an effect. One of them lets you revive it. So what is it? If it's sent from the field to the graveyard or revived from the graveyard and summoned onto the field, one will let the opponent draw a card to have you search any Ogdoadic card, and the other will let you target a monster on the opponent's field, send it to the graveyard, and then they can revive a monster from their graveyard with a lower attack or equal attack. I don't use those effects because they're bad and they let the opponent plus. The honest to God main reason I play them is they're level 4, and more importantly, they both have the same effect that in the graveyard, you can discard a card from your hand to the grave to add it back to your hand. Why do I want them in my hand? I don't. I want the cards in my hand in my graveyard. That's the entire bread and butter of the deck. They are literally just here to get the big level 8s into the grave. That's the whole purpose. I think my deck list plays 2 in 1 of them because it's desperate for names and I'm bad. I don't know. Let's get on to the actual good ones. The super rares from the set they came out in, Ancient Guardians, as I just read. Angu. I'm sure there's some kind of joke about the headless body of Angu, even though that's not quite correct. I don't know. I like Futurama. It kind of reminds me of it. So I call it Agnew. Let's start with Nuya. Nuya and Nu both have fitting effects, that is to discard themselves from the hand to send a opposite attribute reptile from the deck to the graveyard. Namely, you can send the dark one to foolish any light reptile, and you can send the light one to foolish any dark reptile. These are both very good since everything wants to happen in the grave. And then for the unique effects, if Nuya is normal or special summoned, you can add any Ogdoadic spell or trap, and Nu can revive itself from the grave onto your field if you control no monsters or if all the monsters you control are reptiles. Basically, it just means you get a free body on field and you get some Stratos-esque plussing. It's pretty self-explanatory. They're both level 4. They both got donuts for attack, and normal summoning them is often underwhelming, but they pitch things. They're in archetype Foolish Burials, so you play them. They're good. Also, this one's called Nunu, which I believe is a character in League of Legends. Now, I value my free time, so I don't play League of Legends. However, I did have friends in Discord calls repeatedly playing League of Legends, and as you know, you don't play League of Legends so much as you verbalize your hatred toward it into the microphone, regardless of whoever's on the other end. So I heard a non-negligible amount of bitching about League of Legends, and so to straight up to piss my friends off, I just say Nunu gank top mid lane. I don't know what that means. I don't play League. Nunu gank top mid lane. That's what's up. It'd be big. Oh, you fucking bullshit! You got a guy my teammates. And then just me. I hate that, dude. It's always Nunu gank top mid lane. Pisses me off so much, dude. Why didn't he just new gank top mid lane, dude? It's that easy. That friend doesn't talk to me as much anymore. I miss you, Adam. Text me sometime. Kerus and Alarit, or as I like to call them, Weird Sneck and Dope Sneck, because Alarit's probably like my second favorite. He's just a dude with a snake head. Kerus here is kind of, well, he's kind of an abomination, but we let it slide here in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! These are the two decent ones. These have effects in the graveyard to tribute one reptile to special summon themselves, and then they have effects depending on, you know, what's going on. Kerus is often my favorite to summon. It will revive another level 4 or lower reptile from your grave, which means that you can send Nuya to pitch Kerus, and then if you can bring out a Nunu, you contribute the Nunu, summon Kerus, Kerus bring back Nuya, you've got 2 bodies on board, and you search a spell or a trap. It's cute, it's funny. The downside to this idiot is that the opponent can also revive a level 4 or lower with its effects negated. It can plus the opponent for free because it's Ogdoadic, and the deck can't just be good because Snake Rain exists. Alarit's similar, it tributes to revive itself, but instead of reviving a monster, it returns 2 banished reptiles to the grave, or maybe 2 banished monsters, I don't know, I'm not reading it, and it recovers banished things. The downside is that the opponent can also add a card from their graveyard to their hand, which I believe is a monster, but the point is they can get their Ash Blossom back if they've done it early enough, and that does suck. Thankfully, he's really, really cool looking. So I play them, I think, in 2 and 2, but really the only one that truly matters is this one that I'm holding, which is Kerus, because it revives to provide you for the big names. Because while those level 8s require you to tribute 1 monster from the grave to summon them, the king, the queen, and the god require 2 and 3 for the god. The queen I find is favorable to the king because yas queen, and why not? Or whatever other dead joke I want to reference. And if an opponent's monster is revived from the graveyard, you can send an opponent's monster to the graveyard, which isn't super widespread, but you'll be summoning things from their graveyard for them, so it at least mitigates that plus copium. It also has the distinct effect that if the opponent sends a card from their hand or deck to the graveyard, you can then special a reptile to bring out the big boss god or the king that I'll talk about in a moment, or revive one of the little guys to search, or just, you know, have a body on field for Unga Bunga Biga Numba. Very solid, 2700 attack, and it's a woman, so if you don't play it, you're sexist, and also it's like the best one, so if you don't play it, you're stupid, so a lot of reasons for you to be playing this card, let me tell you. The king is named Aaron, which is a Pokemon, and Aggron's my favorite Pokemon, or one of them, so it's therefore good. It's very similar to the Queen, but it's actually almost kind of better, depending. If the opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand, you can then send a card from their hand to the graveyard, so it mitigates their plussing in that regard, but that's a lot more widespread than reviving from the graveyard. Plenty of decks do searching. Plenty of decks also abuse the graveyard as a second hand, so it might not always work out in your favor, but it is technically more likely to go off than the Queen is when you aren't the one plussing the opponent. Fucking Ogdoadic. The other effect is that if a monster the opponent controls goes to the graveyard, it will add any Ogdoadic monster. So, easy means to plus. I often bring out the Queen and then use the Queen to revive the King, and then use the King to search things to go off ad infinitum. Because the reason I like playing the deck is purely the look of the Ogdoadic Overlord. That glare in there, perfect. This guy looks dope as shit, and I love it so much, and I wish it was better. I wish it was as good as I think it is cool. That's a great sentence, and it's just like, what a sick, dope looking card that is. Am I right or am I right? I'm right. Now, it has actually a truly phenomenal effect. That is, while it's face up on the field, it can quick effect send every monster to the graveyard except for monsters summoned from the graveyard. That's a lot. That clears everything from the extra deck. That clears everything summoned from the main deck. It's good for wiping a board. And it also has 3100 attack, so it's good for, you know, clearing away the board. It's just decent like that. It does require you to tribute 3 monsters to get it onto the field from the graveyard, but you just revive it with the Queen anyways, don't worry about it. Or maybe you'll revive it with something else, because Ogdoadic Serpent Strike is their newest card, I believe. It's a continuous spell that will allow you to discard a monster to summon a reptile with a different attribute from what you discarded. This is notable because you can discard, say, Ash Blossom to revive out the Ogdoadic God, or you can discard a, mismatched reptile type, more ideally, to not have to, use one of the few truly good cards the deck can play to mitigate your plays. But don't worry about that. It's snacks, it's goo, it's puddles, it's neat, it's interesting, it's cool. It also has the effect that if a monster is sent to your opponent's graveyard by any means, you can foolish any reptile. So that's cute. That's decent. That's playable. That is a 3 of in my deck. What isn't all that good is Ogdoadic Origin. This pile of goo does look kind of neat for the deck, but this field spell is pretty underwhelming. If one of your Ogdoadics is destroyed by battle, you can send a card the opponent controls to the graveyard, which is alright, I suppose. And the other effect is that if the opponent removes it by card effect, you can mill cards from the top of the opponent's deck up to the number of differently named reptiles in your graveyard, which if you're playing against a mill deck is quite terrible. And in the time I'm making this, where Tearlaments is one of the best decks, this card is terrible. So you don't really want to, but you could. You could. The other one I like is Ogdoadic Water Lily. This is kind of a nutter butter card. It's really Reptile Foolish Burial, but if you have 5 differently named reptiles in your graveyard, you can also revive one of them as a monster reborn, just provided you have enough reptiles. This has a hard once per turn, but if you can get it going off once per turn, you're fueling your graveyard for your strategies, you're potentially reviving things for your plays, and you can just talk about it for days, and that's what's cool. It's also a water lily. It's a little flower. Isn't that just cute? Just ignore the glowing-eyed serpent staring at the reflection, which will probably kill you. Other than that, though, it's neat. And then the honorary Ogdoadic card that is not 07's greatest. It's Snake Rain. Send 1 card from your hand to the grave to pitch 4 reptiles. Just a little bit cracked, and just a little bit of the reason that this deck can't be all that good, because this is super duper Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial's at 1, this is at 3, so obviously we need to make sure reptiles are bad. That's the moral of the story Konami wishes us to know, which is a shame because I'd love it if it was more playable. The fact of the matter is this deck pluses the opponent way too much to be good. You can watch a video of me struggling to defeat the Edo Pro AI using this deck, and you can watch a video of any other number of people desperately throwing things in to make it more playable. A common one I've seen is Ogdoadic Orcus, because there's some decent synergy and there's plenty of dark monsters and. The thing I've always viewed it as I draw the comparison to Zodiac format, which is a wild claim, but hear me out. During the Zodiac format, there was some number of people who thought that the best deck would be Lunalight Zodiac, because Lunalight Leo Dancer is a powerhouse of a card, and with its ability to OTK, they thought that coupled with Zodiac's consistency would be the strongest thing the deck would face. Time showed that to not be the case, based on the fact that Fusion Substitute Zodiac existed, and even things like True Draco Zodiac were more desirable with the unaffected boss monster of Masterpiece, and just Kaiju Zodiac to get rid of unaffected masterpieces and such. Point is, it wasn't so much that Zodiac brought the Lunalight engine up as much as Lunalight brought the Zodiacs down a little bit. You were putting a fine deck into a very good deck, and then the very good parts of it carried the less good parts. My friend also played Gladiator Beast Fire Fist at one point, and it was the same sort of thing, wherein the Fire Fist things did really well, and sometimes the Glad Beasts went off, and then other times you were just playing Fire Fist with more bricks. It's a case of throwing in a mutt of Ogdoadic into a good deck of Orcus. You'll see this countless times and again all throughout Yu-Gi-Oh! As people desperately try to make their pet decks more playable. And that's fine. I'm just saying if you're going for the win, drop the Ogdoadic portion and focus instead on the Orcus. Or, if you're playing in any year after 2020, don't play Orcus, because Harpor is still banned right now. And if the ban list drops putting it to 1 tomorrow, then I'll look like a fool. But the point is, I don't know, Ogdoadic's bad. It's fun though. It's fun. I feel the need to clarify that they look cool, and when it gets going, it's really neat. You can play in some cute tech. Some of the new Reptilian cards do really well with it. There's that level 2 tuner that targets a monster and negates its effect and drops its attack to 0 and then summons itself, but then you take damage equal to the attack that it lost. So I always find it's like essentially pay 2,000 to 3,000 life points to summon a tuner. But the payoff is, as long as you don't have something like Nunu giving you the Reptile lock, you can then use the tuner and one of your plenty level 8s to make a Baron or something. Or, you know, the Sword Soul level 10 Chengying, I believe it is, that banishes cards when cards get banished, and Nunu gets banished a lot, so that sometimes helps. But now you're at the point where you're locking yourself out of Nunus, and there's Yu-Gi-Oh! Decision making, widespread fields, snakes that cost very little money. It's a number of things to think about, but more importantly than all of that, it's a video I have now made, which, good for me. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say. I think this is the deck list I've been using. Check that shit out. I think I almost verbatim net decked it from YGO Pro deck, typing in Ogdoadic. I'm not going to pretend I put effort into this one. I had the cards, I built the deck, I have them. I can play them. Yeah, that's it. I got nothing else. Subscribe to YGO Strats, be a true duelist, and I will see you next time when this piece of shit gets opened. There's 12 of them. Think I'll pull a Prosperity? I don't.